Every fall, thousands of middle schoolers in Boston will sit for a 2-hour exam with the hopes of being admitted to one of Boston's 3 admission-based public high schools. An entrance exam and grade point average will be the only 2 factors considered for entry into one of these 3 elite exam schools. On first consideration, such a policy seems fair. Admissions is based on merit alone. But who is actually being accepted into Boston exam schools, specifically Boston Latin Academy and Boston Latin School? At Boston Latin Academy, African Americans, despite making up 32.4% of the district, account for just 24.2% of the school. Similarly, Hispanics, who make up 41.5% of the district, account for just 22.2% of the school. At Boston Latin School, the data is even worse. African Americans, despite making up 32.4% of the district, account for just 8.5% of the school, while Hispanics, making up 41.5% of the district, account for just 11.6% of the school. Boston, New York City, and Chicago have all recently been in the press regarding their exam school admissions policy and the resulting diversity, or lack thereof, within their exam schools. New York City in particular made waves when at Stuyvesant High School, historically the hardest exam school in New York City to get into, Black students earned only 10 out of the 953 seats, which equals about 1% of the student body. To understand how such a policy came about, one must first consider the history of selective enrollment high schools, or exam schools. In the wake of the Civil Rights Movement, nationwide efforts to desegregate school districts took root. For instance, both Boston and Chicago were subjected to court-ordered desegregation decrees, which in Boston came in the form of an intra-neighborhood busing program. Racial quotas also became a part of the admissions policies of selective enrollment high schools, i.e. exam schools. In Boston, 35% of exam school seats were set aside for Black and Latino students. However, ultimately these quotas were abandoned in the mid-90s due to a combination of lawsuits challenging their constitutionality and court-ordered desegregation decrees being lifted. However, as of recently, several lawsuits have been filed against selective enrollment high schools, alleging that a new form of segregation has taken root through the admissions process. The test-only admissions policy is touted by supporters as a tactic that promotes fairness and offers the best way to identify the city's most gifted students. But the complaint, which is still pending, tells a different story, one of modern-day segregation in which poor kids of color are getting left behind. Alia Wong, The Atlantic. The debate regarding how to address this issue revolves around how to balance 2 key goals at play. On one hand, how to make the demographics of the school's student bodies more reflective of the school system as a whole. On the other hand, how to maintain fair and objective metrics for entry that uphold the school's rigorous learning environments. So, what steps can be taken in Boston to address the lack of diversity in our exam schools? Well, first of all, increasing access to information about exam schools and opportunities to prepare for the ISEE early on could help to address this issue. According to recent statistics, female, low-income, and Latino students are less likely to even take the exam test to begin with. A second, more contentious option would be to consider the admissions policies in Chicago's selective enrollment high schools. In Chicago, once students have sat for the exam, they are ranked on a point system based off of their exam score, standardized reading and math test results, as well as their grades. 30% of seats are automatically allocated to the top-scoring students through this system, while the remaining 70% of seats are filled by picking an equal number of the highest scorers across 4 socioeconomic tiers. The impact this policy has had in addressing issues of diversity in selective enrollment high schools is clear. Out of Boston, Chicago, and New York City, Chicago's selective enrollment high schools are the most reflective of the racial makeup of their district. As evidenced by the skewed racial demographics of these schools, the current admissions process of Boston exam schools is unfairly slanted against certain students. But it doesn't have to remain this way, and there are viable avenues with proven track records of success open to us. Thank you for watching.